0200 hours, southern entrance of the Taiwan Strait. The ocean is pitch black, a restless void merging seamlessly with the ink-dark sky. 2 U.S. destroyers cut through the chop, their razor-sharp bows slicing the water into frothy white ribbons. On the bridge of the lead vessel, the only illumination comes from the crimson glow of tactical displays and the faint green hue of radar screens. The air conditioning hums a low, monotonous drone, barely masking the vibration of the massive gas turbines deep within the hull. Sailors stand rigid at their stations, faces bathed in the eerie red light, eyes darting across cascading data streams. The heavy steel bulkheads smell of recycled air, floor wax, and cold sweat. The sea outside is deceptively empty, the waves rolling in a steady, hypnotic rhythm against the hull. An electronic warfare specialist in the Combat Information Center leans forward, pressing a headset tight against his ear. A jagged yellow spike erupts on the passive sensor display. It is not a glitch. The spike grows, oscillating wildly across the screen. A high-pitched electronic warble pierces the quiet of the windowless room. The sensor officer turns, his jaw set hard. The coastline to the west is no longer sleeping. It is waking up. The radar warning receiver transitions from a rhythmic chirp to a solid, continuous scream. The tactical officer yells the warning across the room. Shore-based fire control radars lock onto the steel hulls with an invisible iron grip. The captain grips the bridge railing, his knuckles white. He barks a hard order for flank speed. The destroyer convulses violently as the engines roar to maximum power, the screws thrashing the black water into a boiling wake. The hull groans under the sudden torque, throwing the crew off balance. Coffee cups slide across consoles and crash to the deck. On the distant shore, flashes of light ignite the horizon like sudden lightning. They look like camera strobes, quick, bright, and silent. Then the smoke trails appear. Anti-ship cruise missiles ascend, cresting the coastal hills before diving aggressively toward the water. They level out, skimming the wave tops at supersonic speeds, closing the distance with terrifying velocity. The radar tracks show 4 inbound contacts, then 8, then 12. The sky is full of fire. The tactical action officer keys his mic, his voice straining against the rising noise. He authorizes weapons free. The vertical launch cells on the foredeck blow open with a pneumatic hiss. Compressed air ejects the canisters, followed instantly by the deafening roar of solid rocket motors. Interceptor missiles streak upward, turning the night into day with blinding white light. They arc over the ship, trailing thick smoke, hunting the incoming threats with mathematical precision. The sound of the launch hammers against the bridge glass, a physical blow that rattles the teeth of every sailor on watch. The first interception happens 2 miles out. A flash of orange blooms in the darkness, followed by a delayed crack like a thunderclap. Metal fragments rain down into the sea, splashing harmlessly. But more missiles are coming. The ship heels hard to starboard, carving a massive, listing turn to unmask its aft weapons. The phalanx close-in weapon system spins up, its barrel whirring like a giant drill. It unleashes a stream of tungsten rounds, a chainsaw of noise that vibrates through the deck plates and shakes the entire superstructure. One incoming missile clips the top of a wave, destabilizes, and cartwheels into the ocean just 500 yards off the port bow. It detonates underwater. A massive geyser of water erupts, towering over the ship before collapsing and spraying the bridge windows with brine. The vessel rocks heavily in the shockwave, steel creaking under the strain. Alarms blare in every compartment, a cacophony of digital sirens. The first wave has survived the defensive screen. The gauntlet has begun. 0210 hours aboard the lead destroyer. The bridge is a cage of noise and vibrating steel. Red strobe lights pulse rhythmically against the bulkheads, casting long, frantic shadows. The smell of ozone and burnt propellant floods the ventilation system, choking the air. Outside, the night is torn apart by the staccato flashes of defensive fire. The sea churns white, whipped into a frenzy by the ship's desperate maneuvering and the shockwaves of intercepting warheads. The deck lists heavily to port as the helmsman fights the wheel, trying to present the smallest possible target to the incoming swarm. The radar officer screams the range. The surviving missiles are inside the 1-mile perimeter. They skim the ocean surface, kicking up tails of white spray. On the monitors, they are no longer blips. They are fast-moving streaks of heat. The close-in weapon system, CIWS, mounted on the forward deck pivots with mechanical violence. It unleashes a deafening continuous roar. A solid stream of tungsten tracers saws through the darkness, looking like a laser beam of molten lead. The lead missile flies directly into the wall of metal. It disintegrates instantly. The warhead detonates prematurely, scattering burning fuel and twisted metal across the bow. But the second missile weaves. It dips lower, dodging the stream of tracers. It pulls up sharply at the last second, targeting the ship's superstructure. The impact is absolute. The missile slams into the starboard hull, just below the bridge wing. Steel shears like wet paper. The warhead detonates deep inside the skin of the ship. A massive, roiling fireball erupts outward, engulfing the entire starboard side of the superstructure in orange flame. The blast wave shatters the heavy bridge windows, showering the command crew with razor-sharp shards of reinforced glass. The ship lurches violently to the left, thrown sideways by the kinetic force of the explosion. Inside the bridge, chaos reigns. Officers are hurled across the compartment, slamming into consoles and bulkheads. Monitors explode in showers of sparks. The ceiling panels rip loose, dangling by wires. Thick, oily black smoke instantly fills the space, blinding everyone. The roar of the fire is deafening, drowning out the screams of the alarm klaxons. On the weather deck below, the devastation is total. The explosion rips a jagged, gaping hole in the steel plating. Debris rains down, chunks of twisted metal, burning insulation and shattered piping. A sailor on the lookout platform is lifted off his feet and thrown over the railing, tumbling into the dark, churning water below. Fire suppression systems trigger, spraying foam into the inferno, but the flames burn hot, fed by ruptured fuel lines. The captain pulls himself up from the deck. Blood streams down his face from a cut above his eye. He ignores it. He grabs the handset of the internal comms, his voice cutting through the din. He orders damage control teams to the starboard sector. He screams at the helm to maintain flank speed. The ship vibrates, wounded but still moving. The engines continue to roar, pushing the burning vessel forward. The hull groans under the strain, dragging a plume of black smoke through the Taiwan Strait. 0225 hours, Combat Information Center, CIC, the second destroyer. The room is a sealed, windowless steel box deep within the hull. It vibrates rhythmically, a sympathetic tremor caused by the damaged sister ship struggling through the waves just 400 yards off the port beam. The air here is freezing, kept aggressively cold to protect the banks of supercomputers lining the walls. Blue light washes over the faces of the tactical team. They do not look at the burning ship outside. They look at the grid. The coastline is a mesh of red hostile symbols. The fire controlman types furiously, his fingers blurring over the keys. He slews the targeting reticle over the origin point of the enemy missile launch. The tactical action officer stands behind the weapons console. He stares at the topographic map on the main display. The enemy batteries are dug into the limestone cliffs, hiding behind camouflage nets and reinforced concrete. He does not hesitate. He speaks into his headset, the command flat and final. He authorizes a full counter-battery strike. The order relays instantly to the weapons deck. On the foredeck, the steel hatches of the vertical launch system flip open with a synchronized mechanical clack. There is a split-second pause, then the night tears open. A cruise missile ignites deep inside its canister. It roars out of the tube on a pillar of white fire, accelerating from 0 to 400 miles per hour in the blink of an eye. The exhaust plume scorches the non-skid deck paint. Another missile follows, then two more. They streak upward, turning the dark ocean into a blinding strobe show. The boosters detach with a metallic crack, falling into the sea, and the turbojets kick in. The missiles drop low, hugging the water, racing toward the shoreline like predatory birds. Simultaneously, the 5-inch main deck gun on the bow rotates sharply. The barrel elevates. The autoloader slams a 70-pound shell into the breech. The gun fires. A massive boom shakes the entire vessel. A distinct ring of pressure expands from the muzzle, flattening the ocean spray instantly. The empty brass casing ejects onto the deck with a heavy clang. The barrel recoils, resets, and fires again, and again. The rhythm is relentless. The gun pumps high explosive shells toward the coast at a rate of 20 rounds per minute. Miles away, the coastal hills erupt. The first cruise missile slams directly into the ventilation shaft of the primary radar bunker. It penetrates the concrete structure before detonating. The explosion blows the heavy steel blast doors off their hinges, hurling them hundreds of feet down the cliff face. A plume of dust and pulverized rock shoots into the sky. The artillery shells arrive seconds later. They walk the ridgeline in a predetermined pattern of destruction. High explosives impact the missile trucks parked in the tree line. The vehicles vanish in overlapping spheres of fire. Secondary explosions ripple through the battery as stored solid fuel rockets ignite. A massive ammunition cook-off rips the top off the hill, sending a landslide of burning scree and boulders tumbling into the surf below. Back on the destroyer, the deck gun smokes, the barrel blistering hot. The sailor inside the mount clears a jam, sweat dripping onto the loading mechanism, and slams the breech closed. He hits the firing stud. The gun bellows again. The lead destroyer, trailing smoke from its superstructure, joins the fight. Its aft missile launchers fire a salvo of defensive interceptors to clear the airspace, while its own deck gun adds to the bombardment. The two ships move in a parallel formation, a wall of floating steel spewing fire at the land. The coastline burns. Thick columns of gray smoke rise from the destroyed batteries, blotting out the stars. The radar warning receivers in the CIC finally stop screaming. The red symbols on the screen flicker and vanish. 0240 hours, starboard flank of the convoy. The heavy smoke from the earlier coastal fires drifts seaward, mixing with the low mist to create a suffocating gray haze. The two destroyers press forward, their gas turbines whining as they cut through the chop. To the east, a jagged, rocky island silhouette blots out the faint starlight. The radar screens in the Combat Information Center show a mess of static, green clutter caused by the waves crashing against the shoreline reefs. The sea looks empty, save for the whitecaps rolling in the current. A lookout on the aft deck of the rear destroyer adjusts his night vision goggles. He freezes. The whitecaps near the island are moving wrong. They are not braking naturally. They are accelerating against the tide. He screams a warning into his headset. The shadows detach from the island. The swarm hits them. 20 fast attack craft erupt from the radar shadow of the rocks, their engines screaming at maximum RPM. They bounce violently over the swells, their bows slapping the water, closing the distance in seconds. They move like a pack of wolves, splitting up to attack the convoy from multiple angles. The lead boats open fire immediately. Heavy machine gun rounds rake the side of the rear destroyer. Sparks shower the gray steel hull. Bullets shatter the halogen floodlights on the exhaust stack, sending glass raining down onto the deck. The sound of metal striking metal is a continuous, deafening drum roll. The destroyers respond instantly. The terrifying thud-thud-thud of the deck-mounted 25mm autocannons joins the chaos. Red tracers crisscross the water in a deadly glowing lattice. The gunners on the rails unleash hell with 50 caliber machine guns, their bodies shaking with the recoil. The water between the ships boils with impacts. One enemy boat charges too close, attempting a suicide run at the rudder. The gunner on the destroyer's fantail swings his weapon. He walks the tracers onto the small craft. The 50 caliber rounds punch through the thin fiberglass hull like it is cardboard. The pilot of the boat collapses over the wheel. The vessel slews sideways, catches a wave, and flips. It tumbles across the surface, disintegrating into a cloud of splinters and spray. Another boat swerves, dodging the autocannon fire, and launches a rocket-propelled grenade. The projectile leaves a corkscrew smoke trail as it streaks through the air. It slams into the safety netting of the flight deck. The explosion rips the steel mesh apart and scorches the helicopter hangar doors black. Shrapnel sprays across the non-skid deck, forcing the damage control team to dive for cover behind the towing gear. The swarm presses the attack. They weave in and out of the destroyer's blind spots, using their speed to negate the larger ship's heavy weaponry. A third boat takes a direct hit from the main 5-inch gun of the lead ship, a lucky shot at close range. The shell does not just sink the boat, it vaporizes it. A massive column of water and fire shoots 50 feet into the air, erasing the craft from existence. The shockwave rocks the nearby attackers, swamping two of them. The tactical action officer on the bridge yells new vectors to the gunnery teams. The destroyers accelerate again, their wakes churning into a violent froth, trying to outrun the mosquitoes stinging their flanks. The ocean is a chaotic blur of muzzle flashes, burning fuel, and screaming engines. 300 hours, open water. The burning wreckage of the fast attack craft fades into the darkness astern. The two destroyers steam north at 30 knots, their engines vibrating the deck plates. On the bridge, the silence is heavy, broken only by the crackle of static and the hum of cooling fans. Sailors wipe sweat from their foreheads with greasy sleeves. The radar screens are clear for 10 seconds. Then the tone changes. It is not the rapid chirp of surface radar. It is the deep, steady pulse of air search. The air warfare coordinator leans into his scope. High altitude contacts. Fast, they are diving. He shouts the classification, enemy fighter jets. 4 distinct sonic booms crack across the sky, sounding like a giant whip snapping overhead. The enemy jets remain high, staying out of range of the ship's autocannons. They do not strafe, they release their payloads. Black shapes detach from the wings of the fighters. Wings snap open on the munitions. Guided glide bombs. They do not have engines, they make no noise. They simply fall, adjusting their fins, riding the gravity well straight down toward the flotilla. The captain of the rear destroyer sees the thermal track on the display. There is no time to shoot them all down. He screams for a hard rudder over, emergency breakaway. The helmsman spins the wheel to the stops. The 60,000-ton vessel leans violently. The horizon tilts 45 degrees. Books, helmets, and unsecured laptops slide across the bridge, crashing into the bulkhead. The hull groans. the steel protesting the sudden torture of the turn. The screws thrash the water, biting into the sea to shove the stern around. It is not enough. The first bomb misses the flight deck by 50 yards. It plunges into the ocean. It does not splash, it erupts. The warhead detonates underwater. A massive sphere of pressure expands faster than the speed of sound. It hammers into the side of the destroyer like a giant fist. The ship is lifted physically out of the water. The keel shudders. The shockwave travels through the steel frame, snapping pipes and shattering light fixtures in every corridor. In the engine room, a steam pipe bursts. Scalding white vapor sprays across the walkway, screaming like a banshee. An engineer dives behind a turbine housing, covering his head as insulation rains down. The lights die instantly, replaced by the flickering red gloom of emergency bat lanterns. On the bridge, the captain is thrown from his feet, slamming his shoulder into the radar console. He scrambles back up. The ship slams back down into the water, rocking wildly in the chaotic swell. The hull is still intact, but the vibrations are severe. The second bomb lands further away, sending a wall of spray over the bow. The enemy jets bank away, their afterburners glowing like angry eyes in the night sky as they climb back to altitude. 320 hours aboard the lead destroyer. The air raid sirens have ceased, replaced by the mechanical hum of pumps and the rush of wind. The ship cuts through the dark water, trailing a thick ribbon of black smoke from the earlier bridge hit. On the port bridge wing, lookouts scan the horizon with thermal optics. The sea is black glass, reflecting the scattered fires burning on the distant coastline. Inside the hull, the vibration of the shafts is steady, a reassuring pulse against the soles of boots. But the smell of burnt electrical wire lingers in the passageways. The radar screen in the Combat Information Center flickers. The clutter filter struggles to separate the waves from a fast-moving object. It is not a jet. It is too low. The electronic support measure system detects a terminal guidance radar lock. It is a heavy supersonic coastal defense cruise missile. It masked itself behind the floating wreckage of the earlier battle, hugging the wave tops to evade detection. The tactical officer screams the brace command. The close-in weapon system slews, the barrel spinning up with a hydraulic whine, but the angle is bad. The missile closes the final mile in 2 seconds. It strikes the port side amidships, directly at the waterline. The impact sounds like the world cracking in half. The armor-piercing warhead punches through the reinforced steel belt like a nail through plywood. It travels 20 feet inside the hull before detonating in the auxiliary machinery room. The explosion is contained within the bowels of the ship, amplifying the force. The blast wave rips the watertight bulkheads apart. A fireball shoots up through the ventilation trunks, blowing the heavy steel stack hatches high into the night sky. The deck plates amidships buckle upward, throwing sailors into the overhead. The entire 60,000-ton vessel stops dead. It feels like the ship has hit a concrete wall. Forward momentum vanishes instantly. The gas turbines choke and die as the fuel lines sever. The lights cut out, plunging the ship into total darkness. Then the water comes. The ocean rushes into the gaping hole with the force of a freight train. Thousands of tons of seawater flood the engineering spaces. The ship lists immediately. It dips 5 degrees to port, then 10. Loose gear, helmets, fire extinguishers, toolkits, slides across the tilted decks, crashing into the bulkheads. The general quarters alarm wails, a horrifying rhythmic honk that echoes through the tilted corridors. Emergency bat lanterns flicker on, casting a dim, blood-red glow over the smoke-filled passageways. Damage Control Central is a scene of controlled chaos. The chief engineer yells orders over the sound of rushing water. Teams of sailors rush into the dark, smoky corridors carrying heavy timber shoring beams and hydraulic jacks. They wade into the flooding compartments. The water is freezing, oily, and rising fast. It swirls around their waists, dragging loose debris against their legs. 2 sailors slam a heavy steel watertight door shut against the rising tide. They spin the locking wheel, straining until the veins in their necks pop, sealing the compartment just as the water reaches the hatch combing. The ship groans, the steel frame twisting under the uneven weight. The destroyer drifts sideways, dead in the water. A crippled giant bleeding oil and smoke into the Taiwan Strait. 3:35 hours, 50 yards off the port beam of the crippled flagship. The lead destroyer is a dark, dying giant. It lists 15 degrees to port, its rail dipping dangerously close to the black water. Steam vents from ruptured pipes hissing into the night. The hull groans, a deep metallic moan that vibrates through the water. Inside the bridge of the second operational destroyer, the captain watches the tactical plot. The surviving enemy attack boats are regrouping. They see the list. They know the lead ship's weapons are dead. They turn their bows inward, accelerating for the kill shot. The captain does not blink. He orders a hard flank maneuver, interposition course. The operational destroyer surges forward. The gas turbines scream, pushing the engines to 110% capacity. The bow rises out of the water, crashing down on the swell, carving a path of white foam. The ship drives itself physically between the drifting wreck and the incoming enemy swarm. It becomes a steel wall. The enemy boats open fire. Heavy machine gun rounds rake the side of the shielding destroyer. Bullets hammer against the hull, stripping paint and sparking on the armor belt. A rocket-propelled grenade strikes the superstructure, detonating against the radar mast. Shrapnel rains down on the signal deck, pinging off the steel floor plates like hail. The destroyer takes the beating. It does not flinch. The tactical action officer yells, "Batteries release." The 5-inch main gun on the bow lowers its barrel. At this range, it is point blank. The gun fires. The muzzle flash lights up the entire ocean. The sound is physical, a punch to the chest for everyone on deck. The shell hits the lead attack boat squarely in the center. There is no wreckage to sink. The boat simply ceases to exist. It is replaced by a cloud of red mist, splintered fiberglass, and burning fuel. The explosion atomizes the crew instantly. The destroyer's autocannons open up, joining the main gun. The 25mm chains guns thump rhythmically. Tracers walk across the water, stitching a line of destruction into the second boat. The rounds punch through the engine block. The boat violently decelerates, spins wildly, and capsizes, throwing its pilot into the screws. The third boat attempts to flank, trying to get around the massive steel shield. The destroyer's helm answers. The warship swings its stern, drifting sideways, blocking the angle. The boat pilot panics. He turns too sharp. He runs directly into the destroyer's wake. The turbulent water flips the small craft. It tumbles, crashing upside down. The 5-inch gun roars again. The shell skips once off the water surface and slams into the hull of the final attacker. The boat explodes. A fireball rolls across the surface, illuminating the gray paint of the destroyer that stands guard. The operational ship slows, matching the drift of its wounded sister. The attack is broken. The water is littered with burning debris. 400 hours? Sonar control room, the operational destroyer. The battle above the waves has quieted, leaving only the sound of pumps and heavy breathing. But down here, below the waterline, the war is silent. The room is bathed in blue light. The sonar technician sits hunched over the waterfall display, his eyes locked on the cascading green lines. He presses the headset cups tight against his ears, filtering out the ship's own groans. He listens to the ocean. He hears the biological pops of shrimp, the distant crash of waves, and the hum of his own ship's screw. Then he hears the anomaly. It starts as a faint hiss, rising quickly in pitch. A mechanical whine cuts through the static. Then comes the transient noise, a distinct pressurized whoosh of compressed air ejecting metal from a tube. The technician screams the contact, "Torpedo in the water, bearing 270, high-speed screws." The tactical action officer on the bridge does not hesitate. He punches the general alarm. The electronic siren wails, a different pitch than the air raid warning. This is the underwater collision alarm. He yells the counter-fire command, "Hard starboard, flank speed, deploy Nixie." The destroyer reacts violently. The engines roar, dumping maximum fuel into the turbines. The ship leans heavily to the right, the deck tilting so far that the horizon disappears from the port windows. Behind the ship, a pneumatic winch screams as it spools out the towed acoustic decoy, a Nixie device trailing on a long cable, designed to mimic the magnetic and acoustic signature of the ship's propellers. Underwater, 2 heavy torpedoes accelerate. They are hungry. They seek the loudest noise in the ocean. They lock onto the destroyer's wake. The propellers spin at blurring speeds, pushing the warheads through the water at 50 knots. They close the distance with terrifying inevitability. The destroyer executes a knuckle maneuver. The rudder slams back and forth, churning the water, creating a dense wall of turbulent bubbles to confuse the torpedo's sonar seeker. The ship shudders under the strain, the steel frame complaining as it forces itself through the heavy sea. On the fantail, lookouts grip the safety rails, staring into the dark wake. They see the phosphorescent trails. 2 white streaks cut through the black water like underwater missiles. They are gaining. The first torpedo is fooled. It detects the loud, rhythmic thumping of the towed decoy. It veers sharply to the left, abandoning the ship. It strikes the decoy 400 yards astern. The explosion is muted but powerful. A massive dome of white water heaves upward from the surface, followed by a shockwave that slaps against the destroyer's hull like a giant hammer. The tow cable snaps, whipping back onto the deck with a crack like a gunshot. The second torpedo does not bite. It ignores the debris. It continues its run straight for the destroyer's screws. The captain screams for emergency stop. The helmsman kills the throttles. The props stop spinning. The ship drifts, sliding silently through the water, coasting on momentum. The noisy churning ceases. The torpedo rushes past the starboard side, missing the hull by less than 20 feet. The wake of the weapon washes against the steel plating. It continues into the darkness, its seeker head pinging blindly, searching for a sound that is no longer there. It runs out of fuel miles later, sinking harmlessly to the bottom of the strait. The bridge crew exhales. The silence returns. 5:30 hours, open ocean, north of the Taiwan Strait. The sun bleeds over the horizon, turning the sky a bruised purple, then a pale, unforgiving gray. The light reveals the full extent of the violence. The sea is calm now, rolling in gentle swells, indifferent to the carnage of the night. The two destroyers limp northward at 10 knots. The silence is absolute, save for the rhythmic grinding of the damaged ship's shaft and the wind hissing through the twisted superstructure. The lead destroyer looks like a floating scrap heap. It lists heavily to port, dragging its wounded flank through the water. The starboard bridge wing is gone. In its place is a jagged, blackened maw of melted steel and exposed wiring. Scorch marks streak the gray hull where the fires raged, looking like long black scars. Smoke still curls lazily from the gaping hole amidships, trailing behind the vessel like a dark shroud. On the flight deck of the operational destroyer, the war is personal. The area has been converted into a casualty collection point. Corpsmen move rapidly between rows of stretchers strapped to the deck. The non-skid surface is slick with a mixture of seawater, hydraulic fluid, and blood. A young sailor screams through a bite block as a medic tightens a tourniquet around a shredded leg. Another sailor holds an IV bag aloft, his face covered in soot, staring blankly at the horizon. Further back, near the hangar bay, 3 shapes lie still, covered completely by heavy wool blankets. They do not move with the roll of the ship. High overhead, a new sound tears the sky. It is not the whine of a missile. 2 friendly fighter jets drop out of the cloud base. They are sharp silver deltas against the morning sun. They bank low over the convoy, the roar of their engines washing over the battered crews. The pilots wiggle their wings, a salute. They push their throttles forward, climbing to take up a combat air patrol station above the flotilla. The cavalry has arrived. The captain of the escort destroyer steps out onto the bridge wing. He grips the railing. He is covered in ash. He lifts his binoculars and looks at his crippled sister ship. He sees the weary damage control team sitting on the edge of the deck, their breathing apparatus masks hanging around their necks, drinking water from plastic bottles. They are alive. He lowers the glass. He picks up the radio handset. His voice is raspy, dry as dust, but steady. He keys the mic to the fleet command. Gauntlet complete. Coming home.